Welcome to our Sisterhood program, Jewish Rituals on Death, Questions You've Been Dying to Ask. My name is Roberta Neymark, and I'm one of the two Sisterhood co-presidents. You may have met Phyllis Nadlak greeting you by the front door when you came in, checking your card. The trees lose their leaves, rain falls, and the skies are gray. This time of year lends itself to thinking about our own autumn season or our parents' aging and health. And although the mourner's Kaddish is often said with tears in one's eyes, it ends with hope. And it seems appropriate to say the final portion before we begin today's program. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life for us and for all of Israel. Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all of Israel. Amen. This program came together in response to a great need to know regarding some of the practical issues of death and dying, in addition to the spiritual aspects of this life cycle event. We hope it provides you with some new information and resources that are available to you as a member of the Jewish community. And we hope that you caravan along with us to our beautiful cemetery. Hope Warshaw is our vibrant program director, and she's compiled a diverse and expert panel that will cover different aspects of these rituals. Hope and her husband, Don Kraus, have been in Asheville for 4 years and are temple members. Hope is an active Sisterhood member, and she has expressed delight in the warm welcome that they have received here. On her journey towards retirement, she continues to work as a dietitian and a diabetes care and education specialist. She's also an avid hiker, like so many of our newer members. I turn the program over to Hope now so she can introduce the members of the panel and guide us through our program. Welcome.
And I'm going to take advantage of the stool that was here. According to the rabbi for the bat mitzvah woman who was here yesterday. So welcome everyone. So thank you, Roberta, and also thanks to Phyllis, our Sisterhood co-president, for your support and work as we pulled this program together. The devil is always in the details. So also a big thanks to Buffy, who popped in this morning, dressed very warmly to go out for a hike, but she assisted us with publicity and a hand with all the hidden details. So welcome everyone to the sanctuary, as well as those people who are logging on virtually. And I'll make a few housekeeping comments and then offer a few thoughts to hopefully frame our discussion on Jewish rituals and death this morning. I'll then introduce our panel participants. So to our housekeeping notes, please follow the CBHT COVID protocol of wearing a mask properly for the entirety of the program. On program timing, we originally figured in brunch, but due to COVID protocols, we were not able to include this meal. Therefore, we'll likely finish up our program around 11:45 and then organize for the cemetery tour for those who wish to join us. Due to requests from members who could not attend in person, we are making this program available via our live stream options. In addition, the program is being recorded and we hope to have it available on the CBHT website soon. Big thanks to Cindy Filer, who's in the back, who is adding camera woman to her list of roles in our community. So thank you, Cindy. To a few thoughts to frame and ready us to discuss what, at least for me, is a challenging topic and one I tend to want to avoid. The genesis for this program originated, admittedly, selfishly. As a relative newcomer to Asheville and the CBHT community, and not getting any younger, as they say, I found myself pondering questions about CBHT's services around death and dying, and where in Asheville our members, if they so choose, are buried. I floated the idea for this program around, and there was great interest. So your presence today affirms this. We are all well aware that, as said by Benjamin Franklin in 1789, in a famous quote about our new Constitution, quote, "But in this world nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes," right, end quote. Death is for sure a reality of life. However, it's important for us to consider the choices we have, ideally prior to when they must be put into motion, because unlike many aspects of life, we are never quite sure how, when, or where our death will take place, and whether we'll have time or opportunities to say goodbye and share parting thoughts with loved ones. Frankly and personally, pondering all of these questions is quite scary. Certainly topics I'd rather avoid contemplating. But I'll hope you'll join me today and set your intention on learning. In preparing these comments, I emailed Rabbi Mary, who will offer some concluding remarks later for her thoughts about our discussion. She responded, quote, "Whatever we can do to message that death is a normal part of the living process, and our society making it invisible and taboo is what is not normal. The reality is, when embraced, we have an opportunity to make some choices about how we craft our end of life. That should be empowering," end quote. So please hold these thoughts close as I briefly introduce our speakers in the order that they will speak. So Sharon Farr has spent 20 years researching Asheville's Jewish history and is known as Asheville's Jewish historian. Sharon has authored several books, including A Home in Shalomville, The History of Asheville's Jewish Community, which you can purchase in the Sisterhood gift shop right outside the door. More about that in a moment. She has assisted in building the collections of Jewish life in Western North Carolina at UNC Asheville, and has created interpretive panels that highlight locations of Jewish significance here in AVL. Sharon is also a CBHT member. Terry Morris from the Morris Family Funeral Home is a licensed funeral director in North Carolina and South Carolina. She is also an advanced planning counselor, cremation certified technician, and certified grief recovery specialist with over 28 years of experience in the funeral industry. The Morris Family Funeral Home is now managed by the 5th generation of Morrises. Terry will focus her content on what happens when death occurs. Buddy Reisenberg has the briefest introduction. He simply wanted me to let you know that he is chairman of the CBHT Cemetery Committee. I understand Buddy has held this position for a number of years. Melissa Seligman, a CBHT member, is co-chair of our Caring Community Circle along with Cindy Filer. Melissa is the author of 2 books, The Day After He Left for Iraq and Simply Green. Melissa is a writing coach, a death doula, and a conscious dying educator. In the words of Cindy Filer, Melissa's co-chair on CCC, from Cindy's Devar a week ago Friday, and I quote, "We are so fortunate that Melissa has made being a death doula her life's work. She has taught me that the key to having a good death is to have a good life." After we hear from all the speakers, plus Rabbi Mary, who I will invite up for a few comments, we will have time for some Q&A. And so we'll take time to answer your questions. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Sharon. Do you want this or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Hope, and thank you for inviting me. So,
You can take your mask off.
oh, yeah, I forgot. So because we're live streaming, you can see the slides, but they don't show up on the video. So I'm going to be holding up some of the slides so that the people at home can see them. So Riverside Cemetery, which is in the heart of the Montford Historic District, was formed in 1885 by a group of investors. It was meant to be a Victorian rural garden cemetery, a precursor to parks. Prior to this, cemeteries were just crowded and the gravestones were in rows. You've seen those kind of cemeteries. But this one was designed to be a place to recreate, to picnic with your dearly departed, whatever you chose to do. And today, it is a popular place for people to hike and jog and things like that, although I've never seen anybody have a picnic there. But and it is a Buncombe County Treasure Tree Preserve, which it was designated in 1997. It's been owned by the city of Asheville since 1952, and it's operated by Asheville Parks and Recreation Department. Hope, click. Oh. So it is 87 acres of landscaped grounds. There's over 14,000 people interred there, and it's a functioning cemetery. They have between 50 and 70 funerals there a year. And it is a place of beauty and reflection. It was designed by an English landscape architect whose name was Charles T. Collier. And it was the former location of a Cherokee settlement. They found a lot of artifacts there. But it's not just an old-fashioned place. They've done a lot of high-tech things. So they have GIS catalog of the grave sites. They've got digitized interment archives. They've used ground-penetrating radar and drone photography to find unmarked graves. So if you're looking for anyone in particular, there's several ways to find them. So 40 investors were given 20 lots for the highest ground. There are 5 tiers, and the first 4 were for white Christians. The 5th was for African Americans and paupers. And then the tiers were divided into sections. So there's 32 white sections, 8 African American sections, 2 for paupers, and 3 that belong to Congregation Beth Tefillah. And this is a map that you see here with the different sections and the tiers. So Beth Tefillah Cemetery was organized in 1891, the same year that we organized our congregation. It's called Beit Shalom, House of Peace. So first comes the cemetery and then the city, a quote from the Talmud. As Jewish communities developed, a cemetery often preceded them. And in the case of Bikur Cholim, which was started in 1899, which was the Orthodox congregation, that means healing the sick. And so they would take chicken soup to the people that were here for tuberculosis, the Jewish people. But even before that, well, you need 10 Jews for a minyan, but you only need 1 dead Jew for a cemetery. And so typically a Hevra Kadisha would be formed, the Holy Brotherhood, to ensure that Jewish ritual was followed right away. And we had a shroud society too, because some of the indigenous people that came here, the Jews, had no families or anything, and so they would make shrouds to bury them if they didn't get cured from their tuberculosis. So the big decision, to pay $250 for land in Chun's Cove or $500 for land in Riverside Cemetery. Well, practicality won out, and here we are with Riverside Cemetery. It's not technically a part of Riverside, but it's completely surrounded by it. And there's a heavy wrought iron gate which separates the Jewish cemetery from the rest of Riverside Cemetery. So I just want to show you this picture because we're going to see this location on our hike. Thank you, Hope. This is a dedication of World War I German prisoners of war. They were merchant marine sailors, and they were held in what was then Warm Springs, but what today is Hot Springs. I don't know if the temperature changed. I don't know. But they died in the influenza epidemic of 1918, and they were interred in Riverside, but not all together. So in, I guess, the 30s, they decided to put them all together and make one stone. And this was the dedication. It was the largest dedication, well, I should say the largest number of people that ever came to Riverside Cemetery for, and they showed it in Germany and in America. So I thought that was a little interesting. So I hope that you'll join us for a walk. Can you give me kind of a show of hands who thinks they're coming? Okay. Okay, good. It's a beautiful time of the year to be there, I might add, because of those treasure trees. And so I guess we'll maybe carpool, or if you don't want to carpool, we can go, but, and we'll park along the road right inside the gate, just as long as, you have to keep the road clear. But, so, good, I look forward to our walk, and thanks again.
Good morning. I'm Terry Morris. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I am part of the Morris Funeral Home family, and I want to thank you all for letting us come and be represented here to share with you some of the things that I get asked questions every single day. So, not to steal Sharon's thunder about Riverside Cemetery, but Riverside Cemetery is a very special place in our family. Our son is buried there. He died 9 years ago, and we had our choice of many cemeteries in this town, and we chose Riverside. And it is a place that I respect and I recommend and refer people to all the time. It's well maintained. It is a perpetual care cemetery. And Josh, who is the sexton of the cemetery, does a beautiful job. And so does Buddy, and I'm not going to steal his thunder either. Morris Funeral Home is the oldest funeral home in western North Carolina. In 1918, Augustus Reynolds, who is part of the Reynolds Mountain family, started Reynolds Mortuary. And it has moved 3 or 4 times since it began. And Mr. Reynolds did not have children. He did not marry. And so he left, when he died, he left the funeral home to his nephew, which was William Morris. And that is Gus Morris's grandfather. And Gus is my ex-husband. For those of you who don't know, we were married 30 years, 3 children, 6 grandchildren later. And we work alongside of each other at the funeral home, taking care of our friends all around Asheville and Buncombe County. Between Gus and I, we have over 70 years experience at the funeral home and as funeral directors. It was Gus's legacy to walk into. It is my honor to be my ministry that God has asked me to do. And since our son died, it has become more important to me as a funeral director to serve people at every point of need. Our funeral home is located on Merriman Avenue, not quite a mile and a half from here. We're 304 Merriman Avenue, and that building is as old as I am. Gus's grandfather started building it before he died, and Gus's father finished it, and it is 62 years old, and that's how long we've been there, and that's how old I am. So I hope we're both aging gracefully. People ask me all the time, what is the most important thing I know before I die? And my response to that is, what is the most important thing for you to do for your family before you die? So there's all kinds of responses to that. Asheville has changed quite a bit. Our community has changed. It used to be like Gus's family. They're an old Asheville family, been here since the 1700s, when in fact Asheville used to be Morristown. And they changed the name because the French Broad kept flooding and it was bad luck, so they changed the name to Asheville. Don't take that out on us. But now we are such a transient community, and people are coming from all over the world to live in this beautiful place. And so traditions, which used to be you grew up, you got married, you worked, you lived, you died in your community that you were born and raised in, for the most part, is no longer that. That's not the majority anymore. And so people come all over to live out their autumn years in Asheville, and then they find out, well, golly, do I want to go back to New York and be buried? If you do, we can take care of that. Do I want to stay in Asheville? And where can I be buried in Asheville? So we can help you with that as well. People have all kinds of questions. What happens when my loved one gets sick? And COVID has changed our world quite a bit. I have one new friend in my life, and it's because I served her family 3 times in 10 months. Her father died of COVID. Her mother died 3 months later of COVID. And her husband died 7 months later with pancreatic cancer. And so she and I became friends of sort out of necessity. The first time it was a shock, and she didn't know how to deal with it. And what happened was, because COVID was so fresh, and she was with her father when he died, I couldn't allow her to come into the funeral home. We were all scrambling back then last spring, and nobody knew what to do, and the protocol, and everybody was shutting down. And she was angry about that, and so was I. Because my personality is if somebody's hurting, I want to take care of that. I've been a hurting mother and daughter. My mom died a year after my son died. So I know what it's like to need people to take care of you when you're confused and when it's scary and you don't know what to do. So we had to do everything over the phone and through email, and it was so early into it, we weren't even using FaceTime phone calls at that point. We were just scrambling as a funeral home, as everybody was in the city. When her mother died, we were a little more prepared. There was a little more time after her father's passing. She wasn't with her mother, and although she died of COVID, she had a caretaker at her mom's home. And so that time, she came into the funeral home with her brother, who came down from New York. And I hugged this woman for the first time when she came in the door. And I hugged her because she was so angry that we couldn't do this when her dad died. Then, several months later, it was my day off, and I was planting flowers, and I get a phone call. Terry, didn't you take care of? Yes, I did. Her husband just died. She's at home. And I got in the car, and I just drove to her house, gardening clothes and all. And I went to the door, and I said, I'm here. How can I help you? And we did everything at her kitchen table with her husband still lying in the front room. It was my first experience with a death doula, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever encountered as funeral director. So here's what I want you all to know, your questions. What do I do when my loved one gets sick? Well, first you take care of your loved one. And hopefully you've had that conversation all throughout life about what your final wishes are. If you haven't started that conversation in your family, you need to do so today. You need to talk to your children. And if they say, I don't want to talk about it, if you say, I'm not dealing with that, then you're doing yourself and your family a disservice. Because you have thoughts and plans for your final disposition, and they need to be expressed, and somebody needs to know about it. If you're going to be buried, then we serve your family in our funeral home. We have everything necessary in the Jewish traditions to set up for the committees to come and do the washing, the ritual washing. We have all the equipment. We have everything set aside. We have the prayers printed up. I see this right here, Rabbi, may I? We have large posters of this that have been printed up and laminated for use over the years. And we take care of keeping everything sanitary, and we assist if we need to. We supply the shrouds for men and women. And we also have several opportunities for people to choose an all-wood construction casket if you choose to be buried. That's important for you all. And so we have looked at suppliers, and we make sure that you all have your options. And we get those. We know that when it comes time for burial, we need to do things in the Jewish tradition of not wasting any time. And so we have, I can't tell you how many times I have, had a person call me at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we have buried by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not easy, but we do it because that's what's important. When we go, when death is happening, when you're talking to your hospice nurse, or if it's all of a sudden, then what we do is we set up a time to either meet with you in person, and we gather statistical information that is required by law. We produce the death certificate, and we are required to notify Social Security. If you have insurances outside of a pre-need plan, we can help you get those claim forms. All of the things that are necessary, we facilitate your obituary, getting it to multiple newspapers across the nation. People say, well, I'll do my own obituary and send it out. Well, 90% of the newspapers in the nation will not take an obituary from a family member. They will only take it from a funeral home. So we submit it. We don't add any charges to that. What the newspaper charges is what we reflect on your invoice. Some people are asking us, well, what if I die at home? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 352 days a year, we respond in as small window a time as possible. Now, if death happens during the day and we are at the office, it takes us a lesser time to respond, but we come to your home and we send 2 people to somebody's residence because we don't want to ask the family to help us transfer that body into our care. If it's at a nursing home or a hospice facility, then there's staff there that will help us. So generally one of us goes. And yes, I still go. So we all go. It's what we do. It's part of our honor and what we believe in. Your family member, the minute we are engaged, becomes our family member because we've all had to trust other people with our loved ones when they died. So that is what is very important to us. We also will tell you that if you want to come to the funeral home, before things happen, and you want to discuss what it looks like, the broad picture with all the intimate details, we will sit down with you one-on-one, and we'll go through that with you. And I brought information for everybody. So anybody who wants to take something home with you, it's all here in print. I've got a box over here, but it talks about what is required for death certificates, what is required for the burial process, who you're going to have to think about and be in touch with, how to write an obituary, what you might need death certificates for after passing. And in a COVID world right now, I will tell you, death certificates, everybody wants them tomorrow, and death certificates are 2 to 3 weeks out because of COVID. So that is something that we are very responsive to. We hand deliver to the doctors, we pick them back up, we take them to the health department, we drop them, we go back and pick it up and take it to the Register of Deeds office. It's a series of transportation needs that we do, and we do that every single day. But it's part of the convenience of the funeral home serving your families. With that being said, after death occurs and the transfer is made into our care, then you all as a community will call us, and you'll set up the time for sitting with the body. We have been doing that for generations at our funeral home. We know the tradition is that you sit as close to the body as possible, but the law says you cannot be in the same room with that body at the funeral home. And that's not anything to do with Jewish tradition or Christian tradition or Greek tradition. It has to do with the laws of the funeral industry and how we keep the public safe. So with COVID, you might be sitting in your parking lot in the car if we have COVID exposure in the funeral home, because we want to keep you all safe. We leave the front door or the back door open. You can come in and use the facilities. You can get warm if it's cold outside. You can sit in our front offices. But if we have COVID in the back, we're going to protect you all as well. So when we cannot have you in our back room, which is usually where we are, know that it's for your protection. I don't think COVID's ever going to go away. That's not what we hear. There's going to be different levels of it going through the future, and we just have to deal with that as first-line responders. COVID lives after death. So we have to be very protective of everybody that enters into our building. If you have any other questions, I'll stay behind when things are over. I know people have specifics that they want to know, and I would encourage you all to take a folder with you, and it doesn't commit you to anything at all. It just will give you provided information that you might need at some point, that you will need, because not one of us will escape this part of life. And as Rabbi Meiri was introduced and said, through hope, death is a natural part of life. And as the mother of a 25-year-old son who died, people say it's not fair. I'm a funeral director, and I'm a mother, and I'm a daughter, and I'm a grandmother, and life is not fair. Nobody ever promised us it would be fair. But what we do know is that we're never left alone. In the loss and the grief, because of my son's death, I have taken the time to learn how to help people. It's made me a better funeral director, and I do facilitate grief workshops all year long. But we need to accept the fact that death is a transition from this world into the next. And when people say to me, it's not fair, I say to them, I was blessed to be a mother for 25 years to my son who died. God chose me. And because of that, God has also asked me to walk with people through grief and the staff at our funeral home. And we do that with compassion and with a passion. We do that with sincerity and integrity. And so know that if you have any questions at all when it comes to death and what happens, all you have to do is pick up the phone and call me or send me an email. Okay? Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
I think I've already been introduced, Buddy Riesenberg. I'm head of the cemetery committee, which means when something happens, we make arrangements with the funeral home and the city of Asheville for burial at Riverside Cemetery. So I'll give you a run-through on the procedure that we go through. Once the temple or funeral home has notified me that John Doe, I'll use that name has passed away, I then check to verify that John Doe has a plot or plots at the cemetery. Once I verify that John Doe has plots, I notify the director of the city of Asheville, which is Josh, you've already heard his name mentioned, giving him information when the funeral will be. He will then make arrangements to open the grave of that particular person. On the day of the funeral, I meet with the funeral home when they bring the casket to the cemetery, and according to tradition, I make sure that the casket is placed on the graveside with the head down, so that the head of the body is facing east. During the service, I remain at the funeral to assist the rabbi if needed. At the end of the service, and everyone is left at the graveside, and I'm using myself because I've been doing this more than the rest of the committee all these years, it is my duty to remain at the graveside until the grave has been completely filled and closed. Thank you. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer them.
Hi, my name is Melissa Seligman, and thank you all for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I am terrified to speak in public, so the fact that I said yes should let you know how much this means to me. And I just wanted to take a moment to also plug the Morris Funeral Home grief app that they have created, which is one of the greatest tools I've seen in a long time. And my aunt died last week, and for the past 2 mornings, I've woken up with a notification that's asking me how I'm feeling. So it's very nice. There's a great funeral checklist on there too. So ask her about that when it's over, because it's a wonderful tool. So I am a death doula, and I'm sure you can imagine the kind of looks I get when I say that. Usually somebody will either say, oh, that's really cool, what does that mean? Or I get somebody who stares at me for a while in total confusion, they're kind of interested, think it's weird to ask. Or you run away from me as fast as you can. And that happens quite often, because why wouldn't it, right? Like, we've been told to be terrified of death. And it's something that we should fear, something to run away from, not walk toward. So I understand why people would think, okay, I don't really want to talk to you right now, but I know I might have to someday, but just not right now. And where does that come from? I mean, there's a fear, but I think it's a fear that's different for every single person. And those fears are just as varied as your dreams and your hopes for this life. It may be that you don't want to leave your loved ones. The thought of leaving your kids, leaving your family is too much for you, and you don't want to deal with it. It may be that you haven't done what you wanted to do, and you're wondering if you're ever going to write that book. Me wondering that. So, there are a lot of things that can keep you from being okay with that. Mine personally, my greatest fear is that I am going to leave this world and not have done what I was meant to do, what I was put here to do. So there are a lot of reasons why I don't say I'm a death doula. Instead, I say I'm a grief worker, because then I have an opportunity to hopefully talk to you a little bit more and get to know you better. And then we can kind of move into later on what it's actually called. And there are many different names. Death doula has become a kind of generic one. My certification is actually called a sacred passage doula, and I'm a conscious dying educator, but there are so many different versions of that, end of life doula, all of it rotating around the same thing. And we all know it's going to happen. So finding ways to work through those fears, that's why I'm here today. That's why I said yes. The other thing that people will immediately ask me is, why in the world would you want to do that? Which is usually followed by, isn't that depressing? And the truth is, I did not choose this. It chose me. And I'm one of those people who has to be hit over the head many, many, many times by the universe before I will accept this. But it started when I was 6 years old. And I sat with my grandmother as she died, and it was a quite traumatic death. And I was all alone with her. And when I tell people that, it's immediately like, oh my gosh, why were you alone? Weren't you terrified? And I will tell you the reason I was alone is because my grandfather faked a heart attack in the hall to make everybody run out, which is a interesting story. Happy to tell it after this. And while that was going on, my grandmother was dying, and I was with her. And I had the opportunity to feel the most beautiful moment in a person's life. And while I was sitting there feeling her hand on my face, her smiling at me, everyone outside was dealing with my grandfather. And when they came back in, everyone was angry, frustrated, sad, felt really guilty, rightfully so. And I was sitting there wondering, what in the world just happened? This was amazing. Because in that moment, a person's story passed to me. And in that moment, her life story passed to me. An opportunity to carry that on. Now, of course, I was 6 years old. Did I know that then? No. I'd like to say that I was that smart, but no. It took many, many years of sitting with more people as they died, many by the time I was 13. I had somewhat of an unusual childhood, I would say, sitting with lots of people as they died in nursing homes. And each one taught me something new. Each one was a blessing. Each one was the most sacred moment, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And I'm grateful that I was alone, because I didn't have anybody to taint for me what death means or what society has said that death means. So that's my why. In terms of if it's depressing, no, it's the most sacred thing I've ever done and can do and am allowed to do at different times, hopefully. There's a buzz statement in the doula world that people will say, what does it mean to have a good death? And it's a great question, and I will also say that it's problematic because there are issues with accessibility and cultural issues, and not everybody has the privilege to ask that question. But when we do have that privilege, in my experience is, a good death means you had a good life. And it meant that you took advantage of every single moment, every single breath, because every single breath is a miracle. And at one point in your life, you're going to have your last one. So in your last moment, what did all those other breaths mean? And what were you doing? And were you happy or were you upset? All of those things will matter in that last moment. And sometimes people feel like that's too late. And that's another fear. So what I have the opportunity to do, hopefully, is to start asking those questions. What do you want? How do you want to be living? What is holding you back? And if you could look at how you would die and what you want that to look like, how can we get there? Because the more I can help you take the fear out of that, the more breaths you have, the more your chest will open, the more that fear will dissipate a little bit more, and you'll have the opportunity to live a little bit lighter. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I'm actually going to ask you in this moment if you will take the opportunity to look at who's sitting next to you, and if you will indulge me in the question of what would you like to be remembered for and why? And if you would just take the next minute or so, one of you share with the other person. You may not know each other. That's okay. I'm a fan of those situations. You may know each other and want to get to know each other a little bit better. But even if you're nervous about answering the question, it's time to think about it. It's always time to think about it. So if you would, take a minute and talk to a person next to you, decide who goes first, figure all those details out, and tell them what you hope to be remembered for and why. Take a few more seconds to try to finish your thought. And if you're at home, please do the same. Okay, and now if you would, please switch places. If you have listened, please share. If you need to partner up and have a third person, please look around and see who needs that, and switch places. What would you like, what would you hope to be remembered for and why? Yeah, it's the same question. One person went and then the other person. Oh, you already did? Okay, take a moment to finish your thought. Okay, thank you for doing that. If you're at home, thank you for doing that. Now I'd like for you to just take a moment in silence and ask yourself how you felt about your answer. Do you feel like you are doing what you hope to be remembered for? Do you feel like that's happening right now? Are there things you want to work on, things you want to change? So just take a moment and take stock of those things. So when someone asks me what a death doula does, this is what we do. We try to help you figure out what would be keeping you from having a peaceful death. what block you might have, what celebration we should maybe toast. Sometimes those things are logistical. Sometimes you need the paperwork. Sometimes you need someone like Terry to help you figure those things out. I can help you figure those things out as well. Sometimes it's emotional, and we work through that too. Sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes it's that relationship that you still haven't fixed or mended, and you're terrified to die without doing that. Those are the things that we work through. Now, I will say that a death doula is as varied as people are. So I am very into creative things. I love to look at your legacy. Maybe you haven't completed your family tree. Maybe you want a photo shoot. Maybe you want me to help you write that book you haven't written yet. Those are things I love to do in the creative world. But in terms of will I sit with you while you die, 100%. Or would I be in that space and hold your family 100%? Because that's what my grandmother taught me. Which is the most important thing I could ever do. And if you do allow that space, it is an honor. And I don't take it lightly. So that's what I do as a death doula. We have another Jewish death doula in the audience, and you are welcome, I hope, to ask her what she enjoys or what she likes or what her specialty is. I know one of them's yoga, which makes me happy. So we have a lot of different services that we're willing to provide, and it can go from caregiving to creative things to spiritual things to body work to sitting vigil as you die or taking care of your family after and doing grief work. So the next question I usually get, once I've kind of explained what a death doula does, why I do it, why I care, why it's not depressing to me, and why I think it's the most important thing I'll ever do, is why in the world would I want to be in charge of the CBHT portion of the Hever Kadisha? Like adding just another part of that on with the additional question of, isn't that depressing? If you don't mind, thank you. My grandmother, when she died, people would say you don't have very many memories of her. And the truth is, I don't. I don't remember what she liked to cook. I don't remember how she looked. I don't remember how she smelled. I remember that there was a macrame plant holder that she taught me how to braid on as it hung from her ceiling. And I remember that she had the largest Jesus coloring book I've ever seen in my life. So, if that's no indication, I was not raised Jewish. I was raised incredibly, extremely Southern Baptist, as in you can't sling a cat in my family and not hit a preacher kind of Southern Baptist. So Judaism wasn't necessarily in my world until I had an opportunity to meet my now husband. But one of the things that really drew me to Judaism, and one of the places where I see the soul of myself, which is I feel like I want all of my choices to come from where I see the soul of myself, was in the ritual. These beautiful sacred practices. Even, the small ones that just bring me back to the moment, the Shabbat candles that remind me why I'm here, what I'm doing, the covering my eyes to remind me why I'm doing it. I love those things so much. And having not grown up with them, I think sometimes I'm probably more protective of them than I should be. But one of the things that matters to me, especially for my children, is to remember that those rituals were protected, they were passed down, they made it through genocide, and they need to keep going. And one of the most sacred ones for me is the Hever Kadisha Society, which means Holy Society. And these are the 3 offerings that we're involved with in terms of when you die, the kinds of rituals that we offer. The first one is Tahara, which is the ritualistic washing of a body before you are buried. And I have had the opportunity to see how Morris Funeral Home treats that, and it's incredibly reverent and very respectful, and I'm very grateful for that space. We do that with the Western North Carolina Jewish Burial Society. We are part of the overall Western North Carolina Hever Kadisha. The other thing that we offer through the Western North Carolina Burial Society is to be a shomer or shomrim. And shomer literally means guardian. And what that means is that someone is sitting with you the entire time from your family until you're put into the earth, if that's how you want to be buried. I can't think of a more sacred space to be in. That sense of protecting, making sure that that person knows they're loved, cared for, they mattered, their story mattered, and that you're going to hold that space, and especially while someone or a group of people is in another room cleansing you and washing you and making sure that you are taken care of and loved in the deepest possible way. All of this while hopefully your family knows that you are being loved and taken care of and that you're not alone somewhere in the dark. What we offer at CBHT all on our own is Shiva. And I've had the opportunity to sit Shiva with this community, and it's one of the reasons why I joined the Caring Community Circle, is because I wanted to be able to pay that forward and to make sure other people felt that as well. Which means that once we have taken care of you, we have the opportunity to take care of your family. And those days of Shiva are incredibly important to protect for them as well, so that they can grieve you well, and they can share your stories in community so that you will live on. So those are the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. What I would love to build with all of you is new death rituals here that are specific to us, things that you want, how you specifically want to be buried, remembered, thought about. Some of that may include these options, which is every Jewish person's right. I'm really grateful. I'm a convert, and I'm still excited that I get these things. But beyond that, I want to look at what it would mean uniquely for you as a person, what you want for your family, how you want that to look, what kind of rituals make sense to you, how do we celebrate you, how do we honor you. So it's my hope to build that with you. And I just want to take a second to show a short video that'll give a little more, I guess, visual to the explanation of a Hever Kadisha. And while we're doing that, I do want to plug that on January 9th, I'm going to be doing a training about these things, what it means to learn more, what it means to hold that space if you want to hold that space for someone, as well as exploring ancestral grief, which I think is incredibly important for Jewish people. My heritage is Native, so it was interesting to find out, and the Cherokee, it was interesting to find out Cherokee and Jewish people were together. So yes, thank you. For those at home, it's basically explaining everything we just went through, and hopefully you'll get a chance to see the video. Thank you. So I just want to give a shout out to my grandmother, I'm sure is listening. I find it lovely that she was, you guessed it, a Southern Baptist preacher's wife. Now knows that her story has made it to a temple in Asheville. I think she would love that. So this is who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, why it matters. It's the kind of death doula I am. There are all kinds of different people out there, and I encourage you to find what fits for you. If you do want to work with me, it would be the greatest honor. And please know it does not have to be at the end. I really encourage that it's well before then, so that you can have more space to breathe and live how you want instead of being scared of what's going to come. I also thank you for letting me be here today, because it's very important that we take each moment, in my opinion, and love and appreciate breathing and who we're sharing air with, especially since we couldn't do that last year. So thank you for having me and allowing me to be here with you, living, breathing today.
Now you see why I need the stool. So I want to invite Rabbi Mary up to provide us with a few concluding comments, and then we're going to do a Q&A, and I will come back up and provide a couple of concluding comments.
Hi, everybody. I want to say, first of all, I want to say thank you and how blessed we are to have Sharon Farr in our community. And I really urge you to take advantage of the tour that she's going to offer. She offers tours all around Asheville to tell the story of the Jewish people, and I'm sure that tour is going to be wonderful as well. So please avail yourself of that opportunity, and we're so blessed that she's the keeper of our heritage in such a special way, and senses it as a mission and a passion, which is just awesome. And I also want to say about Melissa and Buddy and Terry that the work that they do is what we call in Jewish tradition a chesed shel emet. It's a kindness, a true kindness, because people who serve people who are dying or have passed, that's a kindness that can't be returned. It's a kindness offered without expectation of reciprocation. It's a kindness that is so, and I think that that's the reason it is sacred and feels like such passionate work, because you just know that when you're helping someone through the dying process, or a family that's going through mourning and grieving, that there's something very pure and giving about that. So I certainly feel that way. I have often said that some of the most meaningful work that I do is guiding people through grief and funerals, giving people a respectful service to mark an ending, to give families a place to be held through their grief. And what I guess what I want to underscore or add as my role in this team of people that you all have to lean on as you think and go through, is that when you start to get clearer and when you have a picture of what it is that you would like to be your final arrangements, many people come in and visit with me, and we write it all down, and it goes into your file, so that when the moment comes, it's easy. Some people have sent me their obituaries already. Some people have met with me. I just did a funeral for somebody who met with me years ago, gave me his whole CV. I had everything right there, just ready to, ready to go because it was made known exactly what needed to happen. People who don't have local family share with me their extended family's contact information so that I know and can be a facilitator of people getting together when the time comes. Many of us have family strewn all about, and so what I also wanted to say is that while we have these beautiful rituals and traditions that should certainly be on the menu of what you consider, this is also a Reform congregation, a Reform community, and so people pick and choose in our tradition what is important to them. So one thing I want to encourage you about is if there were things that you didn't know were part of the Jewish death and burial traditions, and you don't know if that's something that you would like or whether it's possible for you and how that looks, the answer is it's up to you whether you want to do that, and that can also be part of the content of a conversation with me at some point. So this is a menu. It is a project, like what Melissa was saying, to put those actions and plans into reality in a way that's planful for you and that makes sense for you as you think about that time. There were so many things that I also wanted to say throughout the whole presentation, but I do want to reiterate how grateful I am for the Morris Funeral Home and feel completely in partnership with them in being able to execute all and any of our Jewish traditions in partnership with them. And so I'm truly grateful that in a town where we don't have a Jewish funeral home, like Levinson's in Baltimore or any of the ones that you might find in New York City, we have Morris Funeral Home, which to me, in the 14 years that I've been here, is just as good and just as respectful and just as knowledgeable in depth and breadth as to what our traditions are and need to be. I barely have to even talk to Terry when we're organizing a funeral. It's as if we have the whole thing unspoken because she knows how we do it and we know how she does it, and it all flows smoothly from there. I will be staying for the Q&A if there are things that you would like to ask specifically. But please know that my door is open and that would be a perfectly to call up Buffy and say, I need an appointment with the rabbi to talk about what I'd like to have as my end-of-life plans, would be a perfectly normal and welcome opportunity for me to visit with you and discuss all that and give you information as well as record some information so that you can put it aside and say, I've done that, or put it aside and revisit it at some later time if something changes. All of that is perfectly welcome and encouraged. And thank you all for being here, really.
So we'll go into Q&A. So I would like anyone who has a question, to just raise your hand. Ideally, if you can give us your name, I think it's just a good way for us to get to know each other a little bit better, and say who your question is directed to, and then ask your question. That would be excellent. I'll just call on people whose hands I see. And if you all want to, and you can just come up and stand up, I think it might be easier for interaction. I'm gonna take my.
Okay, well,
Before you start, Adina, I just have to say one last thing about my friend Buddy. Buddy, what Buddy didn't say about his responsibilities in standing at the graveside until everything is filled in is that is a Jewish tradition. That's not just because somebody needs to watch over the what are they called? The liners, those people, what are they called? The vault folks. That's because he's being a surrogate, a person who's representing the family, somebody who's there till the very end to make sure. It comes from a beautiful piece in the Talmud which says, these are the duties whose worth cannot be measured. Honoring one's father and mother, acts of loving kindness, diligent pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, hospitality to strangers, visiting the sick, celebrating with bride and groom, accompanying the dead for burial, making peace with their strife, arriving early for study, morning, noon, and evening, and the study of Torah leads to them all. It's like the alternative 10 Commandments. And so accompanying the dead for burial, which is something we all do, but we don't stay till the very, very end because we have Buddy, who lovingly stands in that place after Hyman Dave, who lovingly stood in that place for years and years and years in this congregation. And so we're so grateful to him. And I wanted you to know that he's not just watching the maps. He really functions as a beautiful, I would say, sexton in some way, a showmare in some way for families as on that day. So thank you. And he also is the one who arranges that after 11 months, when you set a stone on a graveside, if you do a cemetery piece, that he would also arrange to have the stone covered so that we can also ritually unveil the stone, which happens at the end of 11 or 12 months after death to sort of mark that first year of mourning. So Buddy is an integral part of our team, and we're so grateful to him. Sorry. Thank you,
Okay.
Adina.
I'm Adina Schoenberger, and I have a question for the rabbi. Maybe this is just a perception that I had and didn't know about, but a long time ago, somebody told me that that cremation was something that Jewish people don't do, are not allowed to do, aren't supposed to do. So I guess my question is, what is that?
So traditionally, so in ancient times, we know that cremation was part of ancient Israelite burial traditions. But at some point, probably in the rabbinic period or a little earlier, a different ethic began to lift off, where there was that sense, like the beginning of the Chevra Kadisha video, that says that the body is sort of treated as a holy vessel, and the way that our tradition chose to express that is through this other venue of washing the body, shrouding the body, and placing the body in the earth. So cremation became not part of our tradition. There are other beautiful religious traditions that see fire as the purifying element. Our tradition chose water as a purifying element, which is consistent with a lot of other of our water rituals. And it makes sense for a desert people to see water as a purifying agent. And the additional conflict that arose with cremation, of course, comes from the Holocaust and the sort of that was one of the ways that the Nazis knew would further dehumanize, in particular, Jewish people. And so the crematoria of Birkenau and all of the concentration camps became another tool of the Nazis to take away the complete humanity of the Jewish people. And so there's also a cultural aversion to that. Now, I will say, things change, they ebb and flow. Our comfort zones with certain rituals change and morph over time. And so I do see a lot of Jewish people preferring cremation as a way of being handled at the end of their time on earth for a couple of reasons. Some feel that environmentally that is a preferable option. Some feel that because, like what Terry was mentioning, that people aren't grounded or landed in one particular place, and so cemeteries. I was just having the same conversation with my mother. Should I be buried in New York where nobody's gonna visit? We're not even part of anything. Or should I do something else? And frankly, what I told her was, I think that there's something beautiful about having a historic place where our family has been buried for generations, even if that isn't some place where I might go and frequent a lot. That's my personal feeling, but some people feel like being portable or choosing a space where they can go in ash form is a preferable way that actually would be more connective to them, to their families, than an in-ground burial in a place where maybe there wouldn't be much contact. So we actually at Riverside Cemetery have a section in our cemetery where you can inter cremated ashes. We also permit that if you buy a regular site, there's a section that has smaller grave sites where it's in particular meant for cremains, and then there are the regular sized sites that you can bury one casket and then cremains with after the fact, and we do all kinds of things like that in our cemetery. I did want to say the reason, because it wasn't explicit, the reason there is a gate that marks the border of the Jewish cemeteries, that's actually, according to Jewish law, that's what's necessary to make it a Jewish cemetery, is that there has to be a physical boundary. And so that's part of why there's that wrought iron gate that delineates, and I think there's actually a stone wall as well that goes around some parts of it, or maybe just a hedge row that defines the space, and that's what makes that our section. We do permit, just in case this is on anybody's mind, if there is a spouse who is not Jewish who wants to be buried with, we absolutely allow that. That's not true in all Jewish cemeteries, but in ours it is. And so we have all of those options. Did that fully get there with the cremation?
Can I
Okay.
add something to cremation?
Yes.
In North Carolina, as in most states, if you want to be cremated, sorry. If you want to be cremated, then there is a legal document that you have to complete. If you do not complete your own before death occurs, so you can come and see me tomorrow and say, Terry, I want to be cremated and I want to take care of it. You can come in and sit down with me and we fill out the cremation authorization. You have to do it in front of a funeral director. If you do not fill out your own and you are married at the time of your passing, your spouse must fill it out. If you are not married, then all of your adult children have to sign and give us permission for cremation. So that's one thing that I say to people everywhere, is that if cremation is on your mind for final disposition, we want to take care of that while you're healthy. If that's your decision, we want to make sure that that is something that is legally taken care of before death occurs. Okay?
So I see Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
My name is Judy Kaplan, and my question is to Terry, and to thank you, first of all, for being so supportive to our community. So, I have participated several times as a show mare, and it's a beautiful tradition, guarding the body, the spirit, until it's buried. I was wondering if it's possible to have a chair outside the room where the body is kept, to feel a little closer to the body. I know when I've done this before, and we're down in the, like a lounge area,
It's the employee kitchen.
I don't feel any connection that I'm really guarding that body. And I'm wondering if it's possible to adjust that somehow.
So we have tried different things throughout the years, and one of the concerns that we have as a funeral home, first of all, the law tells us that our bodies are kept in what we call our care center, formerly known as the embalming room. And even though they're not embalmed, we have tables in there that the body is placed on for the ritual bathing and while we wait for the casket to be delivered, and it's in safekeeping. So the law says unless you're a licensed funeral director or an employee of the funeral home, you are not allowed to be in that room. The other thing is the room that we have right before you go into that room is called our dressing room. And so we do all kinds of things in there. It's a pretty busy place. Cremation is quite popular at the funeral home, and so that's where once somebody is cremated and they are placed in their vessel of choice, and if we're waiting for either the service to happen or the burial to take place or the family to even come and take them back home with them, they are in that room on a table and everybody is lined up. And so some people might find that disturbing, to be exposed to cremated remains. Even as I speak, I have 6 sets of cremated remains in our dressing room, waiting to be taken care of. So we understand the need to be as close physically to the body as possible. Trust me, when my son died, I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want to leave his body back there in that room by himself. But here's the thing, is that when we know that the spirit has left the body and it's just the remains that we have, we are guarding within the facility, that place. We have had some people say, well, I'd rather sit upstairs. I don't want to sit in your employee lounge. I'd rather sit upstairs where it's nicer. We'll provide any space we can. If the dressing room does not have cremated remains in it, if it's something that we can move because we have just a small amount that we're dealing with and we can put you in there, we're happy to do that. It's case by case. And so that's where we ask for your grace and your understanding, is that we're doing the best that we can to serve your community with what we've got going on in the building. Now, if you're upstairs, you can be right above the room. We've got a room right above the room where the body is. You can be in that room and be just above. It's going to be a nicer environment than obviously our kitchen area, and certainly the dressing room. All we need to know is have that conversation with you. So when you come in and it's your turn to sit a couple of hours, you can say to any one of us, you know what, I'd rather go upstairs. And one of us will escort you upstairs. Or is it possible for me to sit, Terry said you have a dressing room. Is it possible for me to sit in a chair right outside that door? We're going to do the best we can, but knowledge is power. So you have to let us know what your needs are, okay?
I'm Alice Cohen, and this question is for Rabbi and maybe others. I'm curious, as I learn more about green burial, and what does Judaism feel about green burial, and does anyone have any other input on that option for us here in Asheville?
I did a green burial at a Buddhist place that was about 40 minutes, I think, south of here. The person to talk to about that is Lori Johnson. It was her cousin, and it was a beautiful area. Do you know where I'm talking about, Terry?
In Hendersonville. It's towards Brevard. It's a beautiful green burial space, and I was out there about a month ago. Again, it is one of the most beautiful burial traditions that I've ever experienced as a funeral director. Basically, green burial is what you all do anyway, because when we put the casket in the ground, the casket goes directly on the ground, and the vault, although required by the cemetery, is placed on top of it. It does not have the concrete liner between the ground and the casket. So green burial is already happening at Riverside every day. But if you want to go traditional green burial without a casket and without a vault, the place in Hendersonville towards Brevard is beautiful. I would suggest you take an afternoon and go out there and walk, because it's got walking trails. Catherine, who is the owner out there, does a beautiful job. Do you remember what it's called? I can't think, but if you call my office, I'll get it for you. But it is really, you all are participating in green burial every day at Riverside.
I have one other thing to say about that, which is when Terry was mentioning the special caskets that are Jewish caskets, the thing that makes a Jewish casket different from other caskets is that all of the connectors and finishing pieces that put the wood together are all made of wood so that they would decompose. So everything decomposes into the ground. So that is actually a prime Jewish value, is that, we're kind of Lion King, the circle of life. And to me, I guess theologically, I find the fact that we're going nowhere, we are still here. There is a conservation of matter, and we are still here, organized in a very different way. And that we do, whatever we do facilitates our sort of nourishing the life and the circle of life that is happening all the time in the decomposing and rising up of new life. Whatever we can do to put ourselves back into that system is I think, to me, what's at the core of also how Judaism sees this, this ritual and what we do with bodies when no longer our animating parts are still with bodies. So so green burial would be basically consistent, just a little bit different than what the needs of the cemetery are, which have the vault and the whole,
So is it Patsy?
I am considering, I'm stuck in my mess, sorry. I'm considering cremation. How do you do it? Oh.
just point it towards your face, yeah.
I'm considering cremation, although I do, I guess the word is own 2 burial plots at Riverside Cemetery. But my husband, I bought 2 because my husband was going to be buried there, but he's residing in California or environment above. And I have a family burial section, the Lichtenfels and Longs, and I'm just wondering if I do get cremated, and although I'm tall, I don't think I'll have a whole lot of ashes. If there's any way to find out if it's possible and if it's legal to have me buried in this family plot, but I don't know if there's enough room, because there's 6 people there, or 6 spirits there.
So I think, let's have Terry answer that, but in a pretty general way, because it seems like you're asking something pretty specific that you probably want to follow up either with the rabbi or Terry or Buddy.
We'll have a group meeting.
So basically, when somebody of an average size, everybody in this room fits that build, is cremated, it's about 2 cubic feet, a box of about 2 cubic feet of remains. Can be a little less, can be a little more, but so your cremated remains are about the size, and I tell people, a shoebox, okay? When you are buried at Riverside, and Buddy can speak more into this than I can, and you have spaces, you can either be buried at the head or the foot of the grave. Can you bury at Riverside in your section, can you bury on top of a casketed remains? Yes, that's what I thought. So if you've already got a casket in a grave, then we can open up the head or the foot and just put an urn on top of the casket. So that's how that works, generally speaking. Again, I think we would need to have a conversation with Buddy about your particular spots and see what we've got going on there.
Thank you.
Jill, did you have a question?
I'm Jill Levin. It was more about the green, which is what I've been thinking about too. And I'm aware about Lori's cousin being buried there. Didn't know it was Buddhist. But this, I guess, is a little to Buddy. Do we have anybody, if that's what I chose, you go to Riverside, you said. Is it exclusively Riverside? Do we have somebody else that would attend the burial? Okay.
Can I address that as well?
And then another little question, you said that head has to face down? I wasn't, east, okay.
East.
Okay.
So when you go to whatever cemetery you go to,
Yeah.
the law says the funeral director has to go, and we are to stay until the body is safely ensconced in its vault, the casket, and the casket is topped. So although Buddy stays until all the dirt is done and the sod is put back on, legally, as a funeral director, I have to stay until the casket is safely on the ground, in the ground, and if you are using a vault, the vault is installed. So there are some legal ramifications there. If we're going out to the green burial space in Brevard, say, they will take your body without the funeral director and bury it themselves, but I think if a family has asked us to serve, we're going to serve them completely until everything is completed anyway. Again, that's I have a license to be a funeral director, and I have to keep that license renewed every year, and I take that very seriously, what my responsibilities are and what the law says my duties are.
Okay, I think we'll take one last question.
I'm going to take that,
Okay.
but it's going to be 2 questions. I'm Don Kraus, Hope's husband. One is for Buddy, one is for Melissa. Just real quick. Buddy, when you were talking earlier, you mentioned one of the things you do is make sure that someone actually owns a site at Riverside. So what happens when someone didn't plan ahead and doesn't already own a site? And for Melissa, I have a niece who's a birth doula. You're a death doula. Could you define doula or what the derivation of the word is? Thanks.
So, Buddy, do you want to?
Question, Bob?
So,
His question is,
his
what
question-
happens if somebody doesn't have a plot ahead of time?
That's up to you. That's up to you to purchase a plot ahead of time so that you have it. In other words, that's usually what happens. I get calls, that I want to buy a plot at the cemetery. Okay, I go take them down there, show them what we have, and they in turn buy that particular plot, and it's theirs whenever they're ready for the burial. Does that answer your question?
But so many of us are very last minute and sometimes late. So what happens then?
If it had to happen that a spouse went down at the time, we can make that happen within the timeline of the need of a burial.
It can be done that way, yes.
It's not the ideal, but it's possible.
Not ideal, but it can be done.
Plan ahead.
I'm not planning that, just curious.
I will also say that one of the things, it is a privilege of membership in our temple to buy our cemetery plots. And one needs to be a member for at least a year because we have limited numbers of plots to be able to have the privilege of being able to be buried in our cemetery. So that's just one thing that, again, it's a privilege of membership and something that we are happy to assist people in getting. And Buddy is your man. He'll take you. He'll walk you around. You can look today when you go with Sharon, see what's open. Although what's open may not be open. It might be reserved, but that's the idea, to reserve.
So Melissa, do you want to answer what is a doula?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people will have that question, and I'm still not certain that there's a specific definition that's been put forth for even a birth doula, even though they've been around for a while as well. But essentially, a doula is a helper in a situation, not a doctor, not somebody involved with any kind of medical care, not a therapist, but they're in the capacity to work with you, be it grief, be it logistical paperwork. So like a birth doula will help you create a birth plan, and when you go into the hospital, that doula will advocate for your birth plan and advocate for you. And one of the things that I loved about it, I didn't get to have my doula because my husband actually came back from his deployment, and I was kind of bummed because I was going to get a doula, is that they are there for you. They're not there necessarily to listen. I mean, hopefully they won't fight your doctor, but if they need to, they will. And also to be someone who can help you in whatever capacity you need. And that has a lot of variances, but what I can say is very specific to it is it's non-medical and it's non-clinical. So it's basically a support system. A lot of us have medical backgrounds and medical histories. When they are showing up as death doulas, they are not there in that capacity. However, if they are working with hospice, which we love to do, it's between them at that point in terms of how that doula wants to show up. Other people may have clinical therapist experience, and when they're coming to you as a death doula, they are not your therapist. Do they have those skills to bring to the table? Yes. But are they there in that capacity? No. And one of the wonderful things for me personally about being a doula is there are no real regulations just yet. So what that means is that I can show up exactly how you need me within my realm of professional possibility, which means you do not want me giving you medicine, I promise. I don't need to be in that arena ever. But I have a lot of experience with grief, with trauma, with sitting with people while they die, with family dynamics. And I will also do all the logistics and help you out. I have many connections for what you need. If you're looking for several of us to work with you, we have a nice group of sisters that we work together. And we are very varied. But just remember that we are non-medical and non-clinical. So that gives us the freedom to be whatever you want us to be, other than those two things. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Before we end, I would like to tell you that in our folders that we're providing for everybody, because of my own personal grief journey and how I believe that it is so important for people to admit their grief and work through it, take that journey that we are all on, we have to put together a grief app, and it is free. It's a gift that we are giving this community. It's fairly new for us. It's in your folders, but it's if you have a smartphone, you can go to your app store and you can upload it, and then it's got our code here, which is just the zip code to the funeral home. I introduced it to Melissa the other day, and she is already using it. It is many pages deep on this app. The first thing is that if you are feeling, I get a text message, a quiet text message at 7 a.m. and it says, Terry, how are you today? I can be lonely, I can be missing Aaron or my mom, and I can hit lonely. And if I hit lonely every day for 10 days, I'm gonna get a different message. And the message is less than a minute long, but it gets me started. Into this app, it's got scriptures. It also has what to do if I'm a veteran after death. What do I have to do with Social Security? So it's also got information that is very practical as well as grief sharing. So this is a gift from, we're the only funeral home within 100 miles that is offering this. It's fairly new to us, which is why I forgot to share it with you before, but we would like you all to take advantage, and you can share it through your phone with anybody that you can be in California if you like.
Is that inside the folder?
It's inside the folder, right.
So grab one before you go. So just want to make a few concluding comments. Just a really big thank you to all of our speakers, Sharon, wherever she is, Buddy, Terry, Melissa, and Rabbi Miri. We appreciate your time and your expertise and contributions to our discussion. And in appreciation of all of our panel participants and their contributions to the event, the Sisterhood is making a $100 contribution to this CBHT Cemetery Fund in your honor. So thanks again to each of you for your time. I want to again mention our CBHT Caring Community Circle, co-chaired now by Melissa and Cindy. You'll find details about CCC in a brochure that we have copies of, and I don't know exactly where those are. See Melissa. And hopefully that is also downloadable on the website. Quoting Cindy again from her Devar a week ago, the CCC's mission is to make a positive impact on the lives of our congregants by providing a personal touch that enhances well-being and inspires us to stay connected. The Torah commands us to practice acts of loving kindness. So in essence, each and every one of us is a member of our caring community circle. While death is never easy, it can be made just a bit more bearable with the love and support of our community. CCC is here to provide support. One of the areas CCC is looking to expand is to offer trainings both in how to assist Jewish death rituals and also to provide opportunities and dialogue to help congregants delve into what their own wishes would be for a good death, end quote. So I encourage people to contact Melissa or Cindy. I want to next mention 2 future Sisterhood program events. On November 18th from 7 to 8:30 p.m., we will hold an event titled The Pandemic from a Woman's Lens. And this will be a panel discussion with 3 frontline healthcare providers, 2 physicians actually from our community. This program will be held at the Weaverville Community Center on Lakeshore Drive. When you RSVP for this event, we encourage you to submit a question that we can submit then to our panelists. This event is open to all Sisterhood members, CBHT members, and guests, and there is no charge for that. On December 4th at 5 p.m., Sisterhood will host a new members' Hanukkah Havdalah party at Phyllis Nalick's home. We will schmooze with old and new friends. We will enjoy the miracle of light. And what I'm most excited for is to view Phyllis's collection of 100+ unique menorahs. So this event is open to all Sisterhood members. So mark your calendars for these events and watch the Sisterhood and Temple emails for more info and to RSVP. All events will follow the CBHT COVID protocols for the time being. And lastly, on the topic of Hanukkah, the Sisterhood Hanukkah gift shop, which is right behind me, the sale is happening now and orders are being taken. Last call for orders is November 7th. Pickup is November 21st Further info is in the weekly Sisterhood and CBHT announcements. Regarding the Riverside Cemetery tour, how many people here think they are going to go on that? Just to get a quick show of hands. Great. So let's assemble right near the gift shop, just outside of here. We'll organize ourselves. We can talk about some carpooling, get directions from Sharon, and we'll go from there. And just one more final thank you to you all for attending, and I hope this has opened the door for further discussion and contemplation. And thanks again to everyone.